Welcome to the ASQ Podcast, where midlife transitions become your greatest teachers. What if healing wasn't your final destination, but the doorway to something even deeper? In today's episode, we're challenging the concept of trauma becoming an identity. Because healing isn't about staying in the wound, it's about becoming who you were meant to be through it. Let's talk about the real transformation that happens after the pain. Stay tuned. Hey, how are you doing?
I am well. How about yourself?
Good. And thank you, Soul Questers, for joining us on this episode of the ASQ Podcast.
Excellent.
Today, we're talking about
trauma.
Yes.
Yeah.
Trauma. I was trying to be all
cinematic and stuff.
Yeah.
I get it. So what about trauma? What
we're talking about trauma. Oh, well, just the idea of first, I want to say, just to start this whole thing, we are not minimizing trauma.
No.
Okay. We're just here to reframe the idea, or not the idea, the concept of trauma.
I think that
that's really important to say.
Is reframing the way that we are approaching it in our current state, in our current society, in the way that we're approaching it right now.
Correct.
I think that's the idea.
Yeah. And it's I know that you said that this conversation was important to have, or this podcast was really important to have, because in a world, which is what you're alluding to, of overexposure and not enough integration.
Correct.
So I think this is really great. So before we get started, I want to share a quote, and I kind of want you to talk about this quote too.
Yep.
It's by Rumi. The wound is the place where the light enters you.
Yep.
What does that mean?
So, again, I'm a big fan of Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung, Frankl.
Yeah.
And these are individuals that understood and did the due diligence, and Frankl actually experienced it. Mm-hmm. This idea of finding meaning to very traumatic events, right? Finding meaning, and looking for our purpose,
as a result of the trauma.
As a result of the trauma, right? Mm-hmm. And particularly in mythology and the form of psychotherapy that Jung prescribed, the idea of trauma was the opening gates, to the hero's journey, to that adventure of going inside, that idea of integrating all the aspects of our psyche and coming back into life with a different perspective.
That's the integration.
Exactly. So that's the hero's journey. The hero's journey is being able to confront the trials, dive into the abyss, right? And then come back with a new resurgent way to approach life, right? Which consequently, when we do that and we take that journey as individuals, we consequently, for ill or for better, will impact everything around us. Right. So this quote is really the gateway. Trauma is really the gateway to evolution, to our own individual growth, to our psychospiritual growth. So, but what I think that is happening right now in our society, it's anything that happens really, really in capitalism, right? It's something that is so important, and such an opening becomes kind of like swallowed up by pop culture, and then it begins to, what I'm seeing is that we begin to see people in the narrative becoming surrounded around that incident becoming our identity. So this is
it's taking right. So it's not, well, basically, just practically speaking, it's okay. I went through this. I experienced this trauma. It doesn't identify me. It's not my identity. It's not going to be my label. It's something that I experienced. And now how can I take that and now grow into the person that I'm meant to be?
Yeah. And again,
is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And that's the gateway to the soul's journey, the hero's journey, the soul's quest. It's confronting these things, right? And again, we're not here to minimize it, because the events happen, and those events have repercussions. Everything that we do in life has repercussions, good or ill, right? But the point is that by us approaching it and seeing life in a little bit of a different way, particularly this topic, then we are beginning to avoid the overexposure that we see right currently in our world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I mean, if you really think about it, look at the mental health industry and how much it has grown over the last 10, 15 years. If that, it's grown exponentially. It's a
Mm-hmm.
billion-dollar industry, right? With coaches and psychotherapies, better help, like all this stuff. And again, those things are important. I'm not saying that it is not. What I'm saying is that we are beginning to looking at the symptoms and not the cause. And then we are looking at, again, which is what we do in medicine, the money. It's in the disease and not the cure.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? Because the cure, once it's done, it's done. You don't need it anymore. Right?
Yeah.
So there's no money to be made. So everything that we've done is kind of like come to that. So we have created this environment in which people write songs about my anxiety. It's like, I'm in my anxiety. And then it's like, this is the reasons why I do what I do. My trauma is the reasons why I do what I do. But we are not looking beyond we're not looking past post-traumatic stress disorder,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're staying in there. And we need to look on post-traumatic growth.
Right.
We need to start looking at that aspect too, because what is it that this is invoking in us to come out?
Mm-hmm.
Because the quest is about finding our essence and operating from there.
Right. That's interesting. I would agree with that, because I know for me, for the longest time, I really held on to, and it's not like it's trauma. I hate that word in terms of what I experienced, because I think a lot of people have experienced this. This is just my own experience. I always wanted to have a relationship with my dad that was like that. I mean, I would like look at other people's friends' posts and things like that, and I'd see them with their dad, and their dad is just looking at them with these big, beautiful eyes, and they just love their daughter, and just everything. Their girl is everything, right? Even just the way like that Jacob, our son, looks at our granddaughter and stuff is like just this, and the way that he speaks about that relationship that he wants to have with her. I want to love her. I want to be. I'm the only guy she ever has. Whatever. But then truly, your father is a woman's first love, the first man that she will love. And I didn't really have that relationship with my father, and it really affected me. It caused me to have, when I'm doing air quotes for people who are listening, the whole daddy issue thing. And it manifested in different things. It manifested in confidence and my self-esteem and not feeling loved. Even in my relationship with you and in our marriage, there was times where I was out of nowhere, I just start crying, and it was just like, these thoughts of not having this relationship with my dad. And I really held on to that for the longest time and didn't know. And I did see therapists, but as you alluded to earlier, not alluded to, as you said earlier, money is not in the cure. It's in the continuing to keep me into therapy, right? And I wasn't even in therapy, wasn't even growing. There was never this aspect of what we're talking about. It was never of how can we move past this, integrate this into your life and grow from this experience, right? Never.
Well, this is what mythology was supposed to be. This is what religions were really supposed to be. They were supposed to guide us through these thresholds in life, right? But mythology is it's no longer valid. We live in a very mechanical society, input output, right? But we and it's very linear, right? So when this is one of the reasons why we have to step back and gain greater perspective, because what you just mentioned is one of the most important heroic myths, which is the search for a father or the search for the mother. Right. Telemachus, go find your father, which Athena told him to go to, Jesus finding his spiritual father, right? Which is a big, big question. Living with that identity, so when you look at myth used to open the door for us. Our society doesn't care about that anymore. Our society primarily is driven by materialistic gain, hedonistic approaches. Now, again, not judging it, just observing it from a perspective point of view. Our job as individuals, because We have to start searching for this. And we have to be cautious as to who we listen to, because the perspective of, I have daddy issues and this has affected me. Yes, it's true. Now,
don't take that. You're not taking that away from anybody.
No, I'm not disputing that. It is traumatic. As somebody that was physically, sexually, grew up without a father, a bastard, right? Because literally that's what I am. It's like I have all those things. Right?
Check mark the box.
I checked actually I did the ACEs test, right? And I just recently did another one, and this one had more questions, and I'm like 11 out of the 15 ACEs, right?
Okay.
Which I understand, I get it, right? However, what has helped me deal with the lack of identity, not belonging, all those issues that traumas are a result. I was fortunate for whatever reason, right, to be driven towards like Joseph Campbell and all this psychospiritual stuff, to be able to get a greater perspective. And the idea is that it is about finding your essence, your identity, right? It is the gateway to that. But
through the trauma.
Right?
Because that's the post-traumatic growth,
right? Because I'm doing this as a result of confronting all these things. So to me, as a center of my expression, it's doing this.
Right.
This is what I found as a result, because this is a creative endeavor to me, right? I'm learning how to edit. I'm learning how to do videos. I'm learning all this stuff, right? Sometimes it's
trial and error. I'm learning how to conceptualize like life as I see it, and then create an approach for it that consequently I could help and guide people to find their own center of expression. And this was born out of this trauma,
right? And that's my example. But thinking about an example of Viktor Frankl, right? I mean, you can go through something more traumatic than that. And even from that point of view, right, you're able to find a meaning, a life that you don't have to live from that, right? So, but unfortunately, I think that our society is way too much focused on that.
Yeah. It caters to that.
It caters to that.
Or it leans heavily towards that.
It does. It does heat heavily to that.
Right. So let's talk about the language of I have trauma versus I am trauma, because I know that's what you're alluding to. So let's dive a little bit more. Let's do that. And I want to talk about the idea of reclaiming the authorship of our story. So let's talk about that a little bit.
So incidents happen, right? And we tend to get stuck on the incident that happens, right? And it is important to advocate to prevent the incident from happening, right? However, what I'm seeing in a lot of this stuff is this, because of the way that we are thinking in our modern society, this idea that we control everything, right? We don't. We can't control everything. There's for some reason, one way or another, nature, the universe finds a way to sneak into our lives, sneak into our societies, and reset us back to the reality of, I'm not really in control of everything, right? So when we start owning things, events that happen that are completely outside of our control, right? We need to gain a greater perspective of saying, oh, that wasn't anything that I asked for, nor anything that I initiated. It is something that happened.
So just to make sure, because I want to make sure I'm following now. So rather than it's changing the perspective of how you look at what happened.
Precisely.
Labeling yourself as that issue or that trauma,
or
that experience.
That you're responding from that issue.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. I just want to make sure I was on the same path.
Or responding, because again, it's my trauma. I'm doing this because my trauma made me,
Right.
Okay.
I got you.
Now, but because what happens is that we are under the illusion that we control every aspect of existence, right? And we don't.
No.
And it is okay to forgive ourselves for not being in control of situations, Yeah, the body does keep the score. And the way that we start eliminating that is by understanding this basic premise.
Mm-hmm.
We can't control everything, right? We are camels, like Nietzsche says in the Metamorphosis of the Spirit. Society, we're pitched into the world, and society, our environment, our parents, they just put loads on us.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't ask for that.
Right.
There's spiritual beliefs that say, well, before we came into existence, we chose this life. I don't know whether or not that's a fact. But what I do know is that until a certain point, I did not know any of this stuff. Did think I just responded for my environment and everything that was done to me.
Right. But to go back to that, if we were able to choose, why would we choose that?
Precisely is the case.
So it's kind of like,
right? So
maybe there's an aspect there or something there that we're not sure.
Maybe there is. However, I could only speak from my experiences, and then someone that works, psycho and spiritual stuff, right? I do know that you get to a point in which you have to take responsibility, right? But you first have to start by opening the gates of trauma, accepting and forgiving yourself for the mere fact that you can't control everything, and this wasn't my doing, right? And then you have to keep walking past that so that you could find who you are and find that essence and operate from that.
So you say that, and I'm 100% agree, 100%. And I know that that's the start, that's the pathway, right, to what we're alluding to. But how is, you say it and it's just like, oh, it just rolls off your tongue. How does somebody do that? How does somebody say you have to open the gate and accept? Like, how does one do that? Practically speaking, what does that look like?
It takes will. It takes a desire to truly look inside of you, right? I mean, I'm 46 years old, right? I really, I've always been looking for meaning and purpose in my life, a sense of belonging. And it's been in the last 5 years, or 5-6 years, in which I really started looking into why is it that I do what I do? Why? Right? So again, my trauma experience, right? As a result of that, and as a consequence of it, I operated from a place that I will subconsciously, not really knowing, from a place of wanting to fit in, wanting to belong, right? Belonging was always a craving of mine, right? So when I understood that and the reasons why I was doing what I was doing, it opened something else that is like, oh, well, this came from here and then this came from there. But I don't have to succumb to that, right? So what happens is that once you open the door, you put yourself in a situation, in the precipice, that it becomes even more deadly, more scary. Because if you're no longer all these ideas that you thought you were, and you were responding from places that you didn't know, now that you understand, now that you're aware, the future seems a little bit scary because it's unknown, right? You believe in something and you create something, but you don't know whether or not that is going to work, right? And you feel that, well, this is now my life. So if I'm not doing this, what is my life things, right? This is the precipice on what you get to when you are beginning to confront it. But that place right there is the beginning of your quest, really, because you're beginning to challenge all that you were. And now you're living from a place of discovery, a place of that child that was robbed of the curiosity, of the needing to of exploring and things of that nature. Then you become that. But you become that from a different point of view, because you have experience, you understand. If you do it right, you become more empathetic, and not by comparison, right? Because most people think that they're empathetic when in fact they're just sympathetic and they pity people.
Let's pause here and go to commercial. And when we come back, I want to talk more about this. And I also want to talk about the idea of accepting responsibility, changing our perspectives, and moving forward with our trauma. Perfect. Life transitions can feel like a crisis, but what if they're actually a calling? If today's conversation is hitting home, maybe it's time for a guide on your quest. At A Soul's Quest, we offer one-on-one and group guidance for individuals and professionals navigating career shifts, identity changes, or simply the quiet knowing this isn't who I'm meant to be anymore. Our guidance isn't about fixing you. It's about walking with you as you release what's no longer serving you, reconnect with your purpose, and create a life aligned with your truth. Ready to go deeper? Visit asoulsquest.com to book a free discovery call. You don't have to navigate these transitions alone. Okay, so back to what you were saying on when you ended, you were talking about perspective, about just go more into, because I think that's a really, like I said, it's an easy thing to say, like, you know, so how does somebody know, like, what is that inclination that somebody says, wait a second, I'm in the hamster wheel here. I need to jump off and get a move on with my life, because I don't want what happened to me to, I don't want that to be my identity. How does somebody do that? I know how I did it. Right. And so it's, I guess I can speak from a personal perspective, right? Is that feeling of, you know, because I did that. Oh God, it's just, I don't have a good relationship with my dad. Or, you know, this is what happened to me. I've just been, other people were chosen above me in my work and in my profession, and da 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 da. I guess I'm just a nobody. And like, I felt that. And I would look in the mirror and I would say, you can't keep doing this is self-sabotage, right? And I am not these things that I keep saying to myself. Like I knew that. And that was my, you know, the metaphorical opening of the gates, right? But what about people who are not in that place of looking in the mirror and saying, I gotta get past this. I gotta move forward. I gotta, you know, transform my thought process. Like, how does somebody arrive at that? What is that opening? What is that epiphany? What is that revelation, if you will?
You feel it.
Okay.
It is
inevitable. I knew
inevitable.
you were going to say that.
It's inevitable. It is inevitable that you feel it, because, you know, the body does keep the score.
Yeah.
You know, the board is right. You know, your body, your emotions will tell you, you know. And
so you got to listen to that.
You have to listen to it. The pain is the gateway, right? That's that uncomfortability. You know, it's like we just recently watched a movie. And at the beginning of the movie, this guy was just having sex and having sex.
Oh, it was a great movie. And
just empty cicadas, the movie, right? And he was just an empty cicada.
I don't remember, but if somebody wants, that's a great movie to watch. It's fine.
And again, at first you said, like, what the hell is happening? He's like, oh, this dude is just sleeping with all kinds of people.
Well, it's funny because as we were watching it, you can see that this guy was almost like he was dead.
Exactly.
As he's doing these motions, you know, like he was completely like not alive.
Yeah. So when your body will tell you, you know, this is the reasons people think that, you know, you could occasionally have, you know, take drugs and, you know, and no one understands, like in the medical field. Like I was talking to someone one day, it's like, I don't understand how is it that people become drug addicts, you know, they should have never tried it in the first place. And it's like, no, it's like, it's facing that uncomfortable thing, right? It's so painful that you much rather numb it.
Absolutely.
Right. However, right, what our society has felt, because this is something that you don't hear in the traumatic circles. No one ever criticizes society. Everything that we do is coping mechanisms and all these things, right? Our society is ill because what drives it is materialism, hedonism, and any other ism, right? That's why people are so divided. And that's why I love Bob, you know, fighting against isms and schisms, you know, because this is what drives it. So we always look at, oh, coping, go meditate, mindfulness and all that stuff. Wait a minute. What's happening in our society that is evoking this type of feelings, this type of behaviors, right? So there is that aspect, but also is us as individuals, because society would only change if we as individuals change, right? So that opening of that door of confronting that pain, right? And I mean, you know, sometimes you go to therapy and it helps you, but if you become too dependent on that individual, that should be a sign that you are like, okay, this is not good, because the idea of any type of self-help It's not to take you constantly over a value ladder for you to do something else and something else and something else. It's about getting you to a point in which you are self-reliant. This is what Emerson advocated, right? But as someone that is doing this as a business, so to speak, right? Let's not deny that. I have to walk that fine line between what makes us sustainably livable and being authentic. I'm not having to constantly take people off a value ladder, right? As a way of maintaining my business.
Right.
And this is what you're seeing in mental health, in the coaching industry, in the self-help industry. There's always something else that you have to keep doing, right? Always something else. It never ends, right? So what has become a call for attempt to heal becomes a never-ending cycle.
Right.
So the idea is that it's not a destination that you're arriving at by opening the doors. You begin to confront things. You begin to discover things about you. And then once you shed all this stuff, now you start living from your own place of expression rather than being tied up to these other ideas.
Right. So I think one of the things that is important then, because that ties into that, is making sure that you're listening to that, or making sure that you're open to that feeling, and then taking responsibility for your action and behaviors after that. Because what is it? There's nothing wrong with having or with taking. We're not saying taking medication is a bad thing. We're not saying that seeking out therapy or guidance is a bad thing. I mean, that's what we offer is guidance.
The
right?
question is, what's the end game?
Well, that's exactly where I was going to go. Is what is it that you're looking to achieve as a result of that, right? That's why I like what we offer. We're not here. Our approach is important, I think, and is effective because what we're doing is we're guiding individuals.
Okay,
I'm not trying to sell, but obviously we're here to give people guidance because we want to help guide people through the process of becoming their authentic selves.
So and here's the thing, right?
And that's important.
It is
that authenticity.
It is very important, right? Because this is what happens, right? We're here. We're creating this thing with the intention, and the purpose of empowering others to live authentically and closer to the light, right? That's our perspective. And we're not going to talk about the light right now. That's something else.
Another story.
Right? That's another story, right? But here's the thing. Here's really the thing. And we have to forgive ourselves and we have to forgive others, right? One of the big traumatic things that happen with people is their parents, right? Their parents. And most traumatic issues stem from family, right? And I love what Thomas A. Harris said in I'm Okay, You're Okay. You have to be able to show grace because this is all that they knew.
Correct.
Right? Self-responsibility and maturity stems from realizing, right, that nobody has everything figured out.
Right.
And people try their best. Now, it doesn't mean that you constantly have to accept behavior that are adverse against you. But once situations have happened, our goal and your objective should be number one, and first and foremost, forgiving yourself, right? And accepting that you can't always be in control. You can't control the universe, in spite of what society tells you that you can, right? You can't. You could exist and do certain things, but we don't even know where it came from, and we don't even know where it's going. So you have to accept that reality. It's not surrendering, it's acceptance. Number two, you have to align with the flow of life and your life. That's idea of dissolution and rebirth, right? This idea of shedding the past and being open to the possibilities of the future, right? Again, all that journey, the hero's journey, the quest for your own essence is completely against society's goal, right? That's why there's so much friction, right? So you have to be able to accept that. you have to be able to take responsibility for your own journey, right? Yes, learn from other people, but you have to arrive at the conclusion that your journey is yours. You have to take that journey into facing the trials, going to the abyss. And then the beautiful thing is, like, if you do that and you come back, right, it's affecting your environment, right? So this is kind of like resembling of the web of Indra, the web of gems in Hinduism, in which at each intersection of the net, there is a pearl or a glass, right, that reflects, right, everything around it. So when you become your own individual, authentic center of expression that lives from that essence, you will be nourishing everything around you.
Right.
Right? You will be transforming what you do. You lead differently, your family, all that stuff changes, but it all starts with you. And this is why what we do, it's not for everyone. Like, I'm not here just to give you like a pill and say, yeah, do this and then you're good. That's why it's so hard to answer what you said, because you have to walk through it. Yeah. And people could only, for me, it was Joseph Campbell, Jung, and all the stuff that I read, well, I'm okay, you're okay, Illusions, Richard Bach, Bach, is they held a light for me. And this is what we do.
Right.
But you have to walk it. You have to confront it. Yes, you could go and say, oh, this is what I do, my traumatic events, blah, 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 blah. Yes, you could do that too. That's not what I'm advocating. That's not what we advocate. So it's really, at the end of it all, it's really the self-responsibility that you have to take for yourself to be able to not allow events, right, to define your life. Those events could propel you to create a life, to go into your quest from your essence, creating, discovering, not too concerned about what the outcomes might be, but just from that essence and living from there. Yeah. Not being caught up into what society overall tells you.
Yeah. I'm quiet because I'm listening to you, but also because I'm thinking, like, that's exactly what I'm going through right now. So, and it's a perfect way to start closing this out. So, as usual, I feel like we can talk about this stuff for much longer, but we can't do that. So, but I do have some reflection questions that I'd like to listen or to leave for our listeners and our viewers, just so that they can, marinate on what we talked about, and also to invite a discussion about this, right?
And also in particular, right, to reflect. Because a lot of this stuff, a lot of the stuff that we have to do is encouraging people to use their mind, which is the most powerful tool that we have. Not AI. AI is a collective of our information as individuals, right? What we learn in society is a collective of that, right? It's almost like the subconscious nowadays, right? The subconscious is so much greater than the AI, but we have to use our mental qualities of reflecting, of asking questions, of challenging, and that's a tool that you could use. And this right here is one of the most powerful things that you could do, reflecting on questions like this.
Right. So let me start. Number one, where in my life am I over-identifying with a past wound? 2, what new possibility is trying to emerge through that pain? That's a good one. That's a really good one, actually.
It is.
And finally, what story am I ready to rewrite from survival to strength?
Awesome.
That's also beautiful. Yeah. So I encourage people to interact with us. Again, we're trying to build a soul quester community. So if you want to share, be vulnerable and share, that will help other people as well.
Yeah. So, be that shining gem that impacts everything around you.
That's right. Absolutely. Thank you for listening. If this episode sparked something in you, please visit us at asoulsquest.com and stay connected for our upcoming book, A Soul's Quest, A Transformational Approach to Life. Remember, find meaning, navigate change, live and lead fully.